sponsored by Wright Honda out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And I am your host, Jay Finning. Coming up on today's episode, it's going to be a little different than you're used to, but I brought in a friend of mine, Byron Jones, into the studio, and we got my friend Brian Calma on the call. So Brian hasn't been on the show in almost a year, but the reason why I wanted to have Brian on is because he's somebody who has paid off his student loans. This show is about student loan forgiveness, and it's such a good conversation. Even after I edited the podcast, there just was not a lot of room for any of our other segments, but I think you're going to really appreciate this because what it is student loan forgiveness is a highly debated topic, and something like 1 in 6 Americans owes money, and I wanted to get some different perspectives on it. Should it be forgiven? And if so, how much? And where do you draw the line? Should it not be forgiven? There's so many complexities in our life that I feel like a topic like that just cannot be cut right down the middle. You have to start somewhere. You have to expand on both sides of that. And then you have to come to an agreement. Do you want to do it? If so, why? Do you not want to do it? If so, why? So that's coming up in just a few moments. But the other day I was sitting here, and this has absolutely nothing to do with cars, but I was editing a podcast and I'm opening up my Pez dispenser that I got for Christmas. It's a little Grogu Pez dispenser. Grogu is actually Baby Yoda, but his actual name is Grogu, and he's not actually Yoda. For most of you who don't care about any of this stuff, it's just Baby Yoda. So anyway, you guys remember the Pez? I put it on Instagram, me opening it up and pulling a piece of candy out, and a few people were like, what the hell is that? I was like, it's a Pez dispenser. But then I had the thought as I'm loading this thing. First off, there's no easy way to load your Pez dispenser. You get it, and you take the candy that is very tightly wrapped. You unwrap that very tightly wrapped candy, and the only way you can put it in this Pez dispenser, as far as I know, is one at a time. So you're literally loading this thing like you're loading bullets into a clip for a gun. And then once you get done loading it, you start eating the candy, you blow through it. It's addicting. You blow through the whole thing. I think it's like 12 pieces of candy, if that. Shit, maybe not even 12, but you blow through the whole thing in like 3 minutes because this package actually came with 3 different things of candy, and I blew through it all in like half an hour. But the observation that I had is never accept Pez from a child. And the reason why is because you have to get your fingers all over the candy when you load them in the dispenser. There's no other way you can do it. Now, what are you going to do, put on rubber gloves to load a Pez dispenser? I'm staring at this Pez dispenser right now with Grogu staring right back at me, empty as he is because there's no candy inside. Do not accept Pez from your niece, your nephew, any random small child. Just don't do it unless you're okay with just taking open candy, open food off of their hand. Sometimes, you're cool with people, I guess. There's people I would take Pez from, but just in general, you never think about how disgusting that is. Maybe 2020 has a lot to do with how we sit back and think about how disgusting life is. But let's talk about cars really quick. So the last episode, we had Billy Johnson, professional race car driver, join the show. Recording this on January 31st, the Rolex 24 at Daytona has completed. His team, Allegra Motorsports, came in 9th place in their division, or their class, I guess, technically. So yesterday, one of their drivers actually tested positive for COVID, and he had to be swapped out with another driver. So I don't know how much that affected the pacing of Allegra Motorsports, but that can't be a good thing. Drivers self-isolating, and I'm sure they'll be fine. And I think I saw a couple teams had drivers test positive for COVID and had to get swapped out. So still real, it's still out there. And people are starting to work around it instead of completely avoid it. So maybe that's just the new norm. Imagine that. 9 months ago, they would have canceled the entire thing. So that's just how things have progressed and how we've just, as a society and whatever it is we do, it's like ants. When I was a kid, we'd go, to summer camp and stuff like that, scouts, and you have to go take a swimming test, and then you get like these little passes that you have to flash when you go to the lake to prove to the lifeguards that you were eligible to swim. And if you didn't pass, then you weren't allowed to get in the water. It's bullshit. Like you couldn't even get in at your knees. You just had to stay out of the water. So anyway, I failed once. Anyway, so I would put my pass on top of the ant hole. And then the ants, they would all get around it and lift and move it out of the way and keep working. They wouldn't just stop what they're doing. in our society, it's just last year we were just stopping what we were doing, and now we're just picking that swimming pass up and moving it out of the way. That sounds ridiculous, I know. Congratulations to Acura winning third year in a row overall in the Acura DPI car, the ARX 05 with Ricky Taylor. So congratulations to Acura for winning that. This is a difference in the cars. So they have a bunch of different vehicles out there at the same time in different classes. So the cars that Acura is racing, their best lap was 1 minute and 35 seconds. They averaged 134 mile an hour overall for 807 laps. The winner of the division that Billy Johnson was in, they averaged 120 miles an hour, and their best lap time was 1 minute 46. 120 miles an hour versus 134. Now, 50 miles an hour doesn't seem like a lot, but 807 laps, it gets you. So congratulations to those guys. Coming up right after a word from 4Wheel Online, student loan forgiveness. As a lot of you guys know, my daily driver is a 2007 Infiniti FX35 Sport. It's about time I put some money into it. Can't just drive the NSX around all the time looking nice. Want to get some wheels? For over a decade, 4Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They're dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. Their truck products cover everything you need for a custom look and added functionality. I was talking about a wheel and tire package. Head over and use their configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. Visit them at 4Wheel Online. That's 4Wheel, singular, online. Joining me in studio today is my friend Byron, car guy. On the phone is Brian Calma, non-car guy. So if you are familiar with the show and you've been with us a while, Brian was on the show for 4, maybe all 5, Brian, maybe 5 episodes of The Last Dance last year?
All of them. Yep.
All 5. That's my dog. As I alluded to earlier, what we're going to talk about is kind of the student loan forgiveness thing, because this has been kind of a hot topic. People either say, hell yeah, write that shit off, or they say, you sign on the dotted line no matter what it takes, get it done, you owe it. So Brian, when I ask you about this, hey Brian, what is your opinion on student loan forgiveness? What is your, opinion on it?
And my initial reaction whenever I'm asked about that, when it comes to student loan forgiveness, is that I'm not for it. So I'm just one of those where when you sign on the dotted line, you kind of like a Lannister, right? You pay off your debts. I recently paid off, my student loans as well as my wife's student loans, going on 4 years ago, this coming September. And so, I also come from the school of thought where if loan forgiveness was given for student loans, then what about those of us who've already paid off our student loans, especially ones who've recently done it? So do we get, a credit for that amount of money that we paid back in full? So that's kind of where I stand. Just my initial thoughts whenever the question about that is posed.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted you on here, because I was like, I'm pretty sure Brian has probably paid his student loans off. And I know he's going to have an opinion on it, because I think the opinion might be different for someone who doesn't owe any money than somebody who owes money. What is your initial response, Byron?
Okay, yeah. I mean, my initial thoughts are, I agree, and I'll be very clear on how I say this. I agree with the idea of student loan forgiveness. And when I say idea, I mean, obviously, anything coming from the government, you have to read, you have to go through with a fine-tooth comb, and you really have to take it with a grain of salt, right? So I agree with the idea of it in that sense. And actually, Brian, to the point you made of, for those who have, recently paid off, things of that nature. I mean, I actually agree with you that, there should be some credit given or something of that nature. And the reason why I feel this way is just, and I go back through and look back through it from my own standpoint. First off, when I look at the loans themselves and I look at what happened, so my loans were taken out in, say, 2005, 2006, that time frame. I graduated college in 2010.
Oh, wait a minute. How old were you when you graduated college?
Oh, you're going to make me do math. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How old was I?
Let's see if you really graduated.
I was 23.
23. Okay, you may continue.
Yeah. So, graduated back then, still didn't know much about much, right? Because nothing is the best teacher like real life. But one thing I do remember, and looking back on it now, and just a little bit about me, my background is in finance and accounting. I've worked in different industries, but basically I'm an accountant right now, but I work in finance and accounting.
Well, hold on. Did you go straight to college from high school?
I went straight to college from high school, yeah.
Brian, did you go straight to college from high school?
Yes, sir, I did.
Right into X-ray tech school, or you became an X-ray tech a year or two in?
I became an X-ray tech after, so I actually paid off 2 student loans. So I went to ASU first, right out of the gate. So that's how I ended up in Arizona from Washington State.
Baseball.
And then, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Byron.
So respect, Brian. Just for the record, respect. I know the grind that had to have taken. But one thing I remember specifically about it is basically how. First off, how college was sold. I remember kind of my sophomore to junior year of high school. I used to say, my pipe dream was to be a race car driver, but I didn't get started at the age of 5 and 6, so that wasn't going to happen. But I actually wanted to be an automotive tech. I wanted to be a mechanic, things like that. And my high school used to have shop. We actually had an electrical class. Like if you wanted to be an electrician, we had, automotive tech class, whatever. And around junior year or so, they took all that away. And it just became just, your basic core classes in high school. And then from there, it was like everybody was like, go to college, go to college, go to college, up to and including. I remember specifically being in one class and the teacher, I think it was geometry or something, or algebra 2, I think it was. And the teacher just ended up asking us what we wanted to do. And I said, I want to be I want to be an automotive tech and I want to be a race car driver. And he basically, he scoffed at it. And he was like, well, you be a mechanic. You don't make any money in that. It's like, no, you got to go to college. You got to do that or whatever. And I even remember talking to counselors and stuff. They basically sold it that either go to college or you're going to be a bum, right? So, fast forward, I'm in college. In the first year, before they change how the student loans work. In 2006, you had a lot of deregulation, whatever, a lot of things changed. First off, and this is leading to my point, one of the reasons why we have such a huge student loan issue, and one of the reasons why I think there should be some degree of forgiveness depending on a person's circumstance, is how the interest rates were treated. Initially, student loan interest rates were variable. So it was the prime rate, which, for those who are unfamiliar, the prime rate is the rate that the banks pretty much lend to each other. And it can be anywhere from, 1% to maybe 2 or 3%, right? Depending. At around that time, I think it was in the lower, maybe 2-ish% range. And usually the rates that they give to end buyers, to you and me, it'll be prime plus, again, another maybe 2 or 3%, they would jack it up. So student loan rates at those times were initially a variable rate that was tied to the market, which the market rate at the time was it was higher than it is today. Whereas now and after 2006, basically, they flipped the game on everybody. And I remember because it got tough even for my parents to, a portion of my loans that my parents helped me take out, it got tough for them because it went from a variable lower rate to a higher fixed rate. The lowest rates you see now is anywhere from 6% to 8%. I think the average is roughly 6.8. And anybody who's looking this up, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know those were the ranges. So long story short, a lot of the issues that we're seeing isn't that people just aren't paying their loans and they just want forgiveness because, they're bums or something like that. It's like, no, they're paying what they can. Obviously, we graduated in the middle of a economy that was still recovering. So, yeah, jobs weren't easy to find. The reason why I live in Arizona right now is because I went to school in Atlanta, but my first job, I was only able to find one across the country. That's what brought me here, which worked out for me, so I'm not mad about it. But again, it was a journey to even find a job. So these loans were accruing interest the entire time at a higher rate that when people, a lot of people, at least my age, when they first apply for these loans, it was at a lower rate. So it'd be like, hey, you buy a car, you think you're getting one interest rate, and hey, surprise, by the way, going forward, now your rate is higher, but you're still married to that loan. Or you can just drop out and you don't have the degree, because if you drop out, okay, you don't have a degree, right? But you still got to pay the interest that's accruing on what you've already incurred. So you're almost damned if you do, damned if you don't. But let's say you don't get a job out the gate that can cover that entire balance. Now you're in a situation where you're stuck. The interest that is a higher rate that what you initially signed up for is accruing faster because it's accruing, daily. It's accruing faster than what you can pay off. So, and again, I know I'm getting a bit long-winded. I'm going to wrap it up here, but I believe in some degree of forgiveness. When I say some degree, Jhae made the point after, say, call it 10 years. If you've been showing diligently paying, whatever the balance is at that point, if you've been diligently paying for 10 years, maybe that difference is forgiven. Now, exactly how that gets rolled out, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So there's a huge degree of analysis that goes into it. I'm not for flat just giving anybody anything.
Okay, well, let me back up a little bit on that, because I haven't actually I haven't really said anything about that on this call. I think
okay, my bad. I kind of overjumped that one, my bad.
No, you're good. On the Hard Parking Violations Facebook group, we had brought it up, and that was kind of one of the proposals. So, yeah. So for you, it's the variable interest, or that's one of the...
That's one of the aspects. A lot of people who got caught earlier on is you signed up for one loan, you got another. You signed up for variable interest, and in moving to fixed, another thing that it did is, as we go through 2010, 2011, 2012, when the interest rates were, dang near zero, variable interest rate loans dropped too. But at this point, student loans have been moved to fixed. So you're not even getting the market benefit of the lower interest rates. And I can't speak for everyone, but I know quite a few people who have been paying diligently. And actually, in my parents' case, because again, some of the loans that me and my brother had taken out were in their name, when you do the math, the original principal that they borrowed and what they've paid over time, 10 plus years at this point, they've technically paid back the principal, but the interest accrued at a higher rate that the principal was being paid off, because going into my next point, it wasn't a subsidized loan, it was an unsubsidized loan, which the unsubsidized loans and plus loans start accruing from day one you're in school, whereas the subsidized ones, they don't start accruing until you graduate. So that was another kind of okie doke that they pulled on people. So while I'm in school, while I'm building the skill set, I'm already getting kind of in the hole when it comes to debt. And so going back to when we actually looked at what they've paid all these years, they covered the principal. But the interest was just accruing so fast, that's how you're getting buried. And it's like, well, you look at it, it's like, well, we've paid this off. And that's why kind of going back to the point and going back to the discussion that was on the podcast, for people who have diligently shown payment, and, it's on your credit report. It's on all different types of things where you can track it. We can track that data, that data exists. I think there should be some degree of forgiveness, because we're getting in a situation where people had the wool pulled over their eyes, if you will. They're getting buried in interest because of it, but the principal was paid. They paid what they owed, going to the point of, hey, you signed the dotted line, you got to pay. They paid it.
What did you go to school for? Did you go to school for what you're doing now, accounting and everything?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And Brian, what did you go to school for?
When I went to ASU, I graduated in 2004 with a degree in general biology. And then 2 years later, I went to Pima Medical Institute and went to x-ray school. And that was a 2-year program. So I graduated in 2008 with that degree. So that was only an associate's degree level, but yeah.
But you went straight from x-ray school to work, right?
I did, yeah. So the thing was about that time too. So 2008, which was, as everybody knows, that's when the bubble burst on the real estate market. And basically, the job market was pretty hosed also. But I was fortunate enough to land a couple x-ray jobs too. So I actually had a full-time job, and I had, in the healthcare field, we call it a PRN job, which stands for as needed. So it's basically a side job where a hospital would call me and ask me if, I had availability. And then so that's actually one of the ways that I was able to pay off my ASU student loan, first. And did it, fairly quickly, because that second job that I had basically paid off that loan in just like 2 or 3 years' time after I graduated. And, at the same time, at some point there was some crossover, and I was paying both student loans at the same time, and then, of course, like I mentioned earlier, back in 2017 is when I finally paid off the last of my my x-ray school student loan, along with my wife's also. So we were able to wipe that out altogether, which was, which was a big thing. Yeah.
What was your living situation when you got done with x-ray school?
I was single at the time. And so I was living with one of my best friends at his house, basically renting out a room. So it was just two of us in one house. And yeah, we were both in the healthcare field, and just renting a room and then working my 2 jobs at the time.
You've always been, now I haven't known you forever. I've known you as long as I lived here in Arizona, 6 years or so. And
what was it, 2013, 2014?
Ish,
yeah. It's been a while. Yeah.
It's been a while. But you've always been, because there's different types of people too. There's so many different dynamics here at play. Mm-hmm. But there's the human element. There's the lifestyle element. There's the how we were raised element. There's the hard coding element. Like, you're somebody you're not into a lot of the materialistic things that generally cost a lot of money.
Right.
You're not cheap, but you're frugal.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
That's true. Yeah. And it's funny that you laugh about that because like, you know me well, Jay, when it comes to that type of stuff. And my best friends like kind of bust me about that too, you know. And you and I, like Jay, we've been in the healthcare industry and IT for a while, you know, even working many places together. And you and I both had ventured into, you know, the consulting world, and you're still in it right now. I was in it for 4 years, and we both know that, you know, you can make a very lucrative income by doing that. And the funny thing is that like one of my best friends was over at my house one time, and he asked to borrow like my lawnmower or something like that. And then I was opening up my shed, and then, you know, the shed latch was broken. And he was making fun of me because he was like, "Oh man, with all that money you made, you can't even fix that latch," you know. And so it's like, it still works, you know. But yeah.
Did you show him your lawnmower?
Yeah, I mean, he borrowed it and all that kind of stuff, but he was just busting my ass about, man, you can't even, you know, fix this, and you make all that damn money. And I'm like, yeah, no, it still works.
For the record, can you tell the listeners what kind of lawnmower you actually have?
It's actually a Black & Decker electrical. So I try to be environmentally conscious also, but because the cord gets in the way, I think I'm going to switch to battery powered because I don't deal with.
Now, what kind of hold on, because what kind of lawnmower did you have when I met you? I'm pretty sure you had one of those old school.
I did. It was one of those like push mowers, non-motorized. Yeah. I started out with that because around the time that you met me, Jay, is when my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we bought a home together. And, you know, unlike many homes here in Arizona, it actually had grass in the front and the back.
You're a more frugal guy. And
I am, yeah.
And Byron,
what
was your situation? Practical, yeah. What was your living situation? What was your life like?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I graduated.
Did you defer?
And I was working
financial forbearance deferment?
No. I mean, pretty much I started off working at Walmart, and I was just paying what little bit I could, which was very little. I got an offer to work for a company out here, so I moved out here, ended up moving to Chandler. Got a little apartment, and I have student loans at this point. But as you guys have probably deduced from what I've been saying, half of my student loans were in my name, the other half were in my parents'. So that's why I didn't have the full burden on myself. And so, okay, I worked, and this was 2010, so the housing market in Arizona was kind of at its bottom. Was able to buy a house in Gilbert. Again, parents fronted me the down payment money, FHA loan, whatever, decent percentage rate, got me into a house. The difference between me and a lot of my peers is because I didn't have the full student loan debt burden on my back, I was just able to qualify for the loan.
Now, remind me if I'm crazy here, because it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But if I recall correctly, for FAFSA,
mm-hmm.
you could be someone living on your own since you were 13, but you're still considered a dependent until you're like 24, 25, or 23 or something like that. And then the amount of money that you're eligible for changes dramatically because they're counting on parents that you may or may not even have to flip the other side of that bill.
That is somewhat how it worked. I know one of the big.
I don't know if it's like that now.
Yeah. Now I don't know how it is. I'll be honest with you. So anything I'm saying is we're talking 7 to 10-year-old information.
So I went to college in fall of '99 was my first time I went to college.
Okay, so back when the dinosaurs walked the earth. Got it.
Yes.
Hey man, same here.
I'm just messing with y'all, man.
So for me, and I said it before on the podcast, I got in a little bit of trouble after high school, and my future was I was going to be an artist, a designer. But when you're 18, and this kind of goes into the mindset of, hey, you signed on the dotted line. You knew what you were doing at the time. You owe that money. You pay it. I've read comments where, it's not my fault if you picked a shitty degree like fine arts or interior design or marketing. But, when you're 18 to 23, you're incredibly idealistic, and not everybody, but the masses of us, you're going to change the world. You're going to be the first person you're going to be the exception to the rule. And so I think a lot of people pick degrees and get in over their head at a younger age because they want to be independent. They want to take over the world, and someone's in their ear saying, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But for me, I thought it was going to be art. And I didn't really know anything about college. I didn't really know anything about scholarships. My parents did the best that they could, but we just never had that conversation. And so once I got out of trouble, I was on like Texas probation or whatever it is, for like 5 years, where I couldn't move out of the state. Not a felony, but just enough. And so the very first opportunity I had to leave, I applied for Kendall College of Art and Design in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the same day I got a letter that said, after reviewing your portfolio, we can't offer you a scholarship, which, by the way, they never saw my artwork, so I was really pissed. But I'd been sitting around for 5 years waiting for an opportunity to leave. But I also, on that letter, says, but we accept you to our school. So it's like, all right, I got no scholarship, but I moved to Grand Rapids and started going to art school. And so my first stint at art school from 99 to 2002, most of that I paid out of my own pocket. Most of it. And like you were saying earlier, there's different types of loans, sub, unsub. And I was able to pay that, but the second half of that, I started taking out more loans, and then I dropped out of school, basically flunked out of art school. And it took me 10 years before I went back to school. 2008, I went back to school, so almost 10 years. Once I got married and said, oh shit, I got a family. I got to start getting serious. And that's when I first got a normal job at a hospital. So I was catching up to you, Brian, in a sense, but I was going to school full-time and work full-time. And I already had my loans from 10 years before, because during that whole time I was going call center to call center, working security jobs. I just didn't have my shit together, And so while I'm sitting around waiting to get my shit together and paying these pennies on these loans, or having 12-month forbearance because I just can't afford it at the time. I could barely afford an apartment that I was living in, which wasn't expensive. Kind of sad. But, the point is everyone's life and their situation can be a little bit different. It's not as simple as stop going to Starbucks and buying all these coffees and you can pay off your student loans, because people are quick to say that.
Right.
Some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And this isn't a Cry Me a River story, but I have a point to this. Some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth and they don't know in any other way. Right. Some people are born with absolutely nothing and they don't know any other way. Some people are born with all the responsibility. So it's hard to imagine somebody who doesn't have responsibility. My wife is very responsible. I'm shitty with money. Like, she got us straight, Brian handles, he's the guy, Brian on the phone, he's really good with that. I don't know where that comes from, but you're really good at that. But not everybody's good at that.
It comes from my mama.
It comes from your mama. You know what I mean?
She taught me. She taught me young, man.
Big mama's house.
She took me to the real quick story before you continue, Jay, but it's funny that you say that though, because I did learn it from my mom. And to this day, my mom is like the financial person between her and my father. Right. But I distinctly remember when I was probably about 6 years old, my mom taking me to a bank and starting an account for me. And that I still remember it to this day, because it obviously made an indelible mark. It just made an indelible mark on me, because I was like, oh man, I can have my own money and my own account for me. And so that's why it's like my mom did little things like that throughout my young life so that I would know how to save and be able to, maybe save enough for something I wanted. And a lot of times it ended up, if I did save that amount of money, I'd question myself and be like, do I really want to buy that thing that I saved up for now? Or do I want to keep it? So, but yeah, that's where I learned it from. It's from her.
Yeah. And that's fair. There's a lot of people who have full ride scholarships and they go in our profession, right? If you're a physician and, you get out of school, you go from basically having nothing to having a lot of money, and your number one priority at that point is probably going to be to pay off your loans because it's your biggest note. But as you get on in life, you get your house, maybe you have rent at an apartment, you have a car note, and then you marry somebody else and they have their loans and you acquire each other's debt, and so it just, sometimes it's easier than others.
Then you put kids into the mix and they're expensive as shit.
Oh, yes, they are quite expensive.
Yeah. So I pulled up my loans while we were talking here. And last year, because of 2020, a lot of the loans, their interest just stopped. And they stopped telling people, hey, for student loans, it says, okay, you can pay if you want, but we're not going to ask you for the money until this whole Affordable Cares or the CARES Act is over with. And so that act actually ends in probably a week from now. So right now it's January 28th. And what are most people going to do in that point, in that situation? Like, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to tell you guys, my payment is $590 a month, student loans. My balance right now, I graduated in 2012. I have a $55,000 balance still after paying almost 10 years on time in like you were saying, Byron, earlier, I'm going down and I'm looking at this stuff early on, just after graduation, these capitalized interest things.
Yeah.
I graduated in May of 2012, and in October of 2012, I had $5,928.05 added onto my balance as capitalized interest.
Right. But before you even had a chance to, the degree that you just went to get, before you even had a chance to utilize it. And if I can just jump in real quick, another point I want to make about this. And so, again, given what I do for a living, obviously I'm looking at, depreciation schedules, amortization schedules, interest schedules all the time. I mean, I work in home building and land development right now, so I'm constantly seeing it, right? And the one thing that's different, I think, in these student loans from any other type of debt you can get, credit card debt, whatever. First off, student loans were effectively sold to, first off, people who at that time, most 18-year-olds don't know how that stuff worked. If you had the upbringing where you were taught about that, I mean, that's awesome. You were ahead of the game. Let's be clear, you were ahead of the game. So I think I had a pretty good upbringing, a pretty good grounding.
And you learned from it, though, because my dad opened up an account for me, too. But, I didn't, it just didn't click for me.
Right, yeah.
And that's millions of people.
Right, yeah, definitely. And but the way I look at it, I'm like, at 18, at 7, or for me, 17, right? If I'd applied for a car, they'd have laughed in my face. If I'd applied for a mortgage, they'd have laughed in my face. If I'd applied for a credit card, I may have got a $500 limit, right? But student loan, oh yeah, we'll give you, this much, no problem, right? So it's like, well, first off, and I'm not trying to, and I want to be very clear here, I'm not trying to take blame off of the person, because yes, it would have helped if you did more research. I went to a school called Morehouse, which is quite the expensive school located in Georgia. If I go back and redo it, maybe I'll pick somewhere else. Who knows, right? But, I know people who went there, paid all that money, and maybe didn't major in something that immediately after school was the most lucrative thing where they could, where they could necessarily start paying that back. And you could argue with more information, perhaps they would have gone somewhere else to pursue their, to pursue their passions. Maybe that wasn't the best use of money. But again, was somebody telling an 18-year-old that? Probably not. But they sure were happy to, giving them loans when they wouldn't loan them. You wouldn't loan them $30,000 a year for a car, but you'll loan them $30,000 a year to go to school with no guarantee that they'll pay it back. You got a better chance of getting a guarantee on a car loan, because at least there's an asset backing the debt. So when you look at how the loans were sold to a lot of people,
but I kind of understand though the American dream of, because that's what they push. They don't push it those last 5 years, but go to school.
Right.
And you can get ahead. And historically, that's correct. So, someone with a degree is going to make more money out of school than someone without a degree. And for everybody who thinks that they're going to be Zuckerberg or somebody else, I mean, you're talking the 1% of the 1% of the 1%ers.
Right.
That's just not everybody. But now people are being sold that dream.
Right, yeah.
And screw school.
And while that's true, I hate that, at the time they weren't sold that, hey, you know what, if you don't want to do school, be an electrician, man. Go to this trade school, be a plumber, do that. No one ever, I didn't even learn about that really until I got into home building, because one of the issues we're having at home building is finding skilled labor, finding people who can do framing, finding people who can do all these things. And even when I work for a land developer now, I used to work for a home builder. We had a big old meeting about it, and they were even talking, and they were like, yeah, we can't get anyone. We can't find people who are interested in these trades. So home builders are getting to the point they're actually trying to reach out to schools and saying, hey, there's money here. There's money to be made here. There are careers and opportunities here. Tell these high schools that, right? So it's like, I think we have a fundamental issue of just in how we're educating and how we're teaching people about these opportunities. And, kind of going back to some of the comments I've read, no, the Starbucks and the avocado toast ain't what's breaking people. It's the fact that a lot of people were kind of unleashed into this world and they were sold this and they didn't have the backing. And we hold individual people to accountability. But again, I'm going back to now 2008, when you look at the banks and all the collapses and what happened, and kind of going to my parents' specific situation, they had to do a short sale on their house to prevent a foreclosure during that time. My father lost his job, a whole bunch of stuff happened. But at the same time, the banks that were getting in trouble, what happened? They got bailed out from a taxpayer's money for all your
but
listeners.
They still went after.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm about to get to that point. So anybody, I know you got a lot of people who listen who own their own businesses. Cash flow is king in business. A lot of those bailouts was basically just a cash flow float for these banks to get them through that time, right? But at the same time, they got a cash flow float using our money, right? Or using my parents' money at the time. On top of that, they still got to foreclose on their house. And then they later sold that house and recouped some of that loss because maybe they didn't sell it at market price. They recouped some of that loss. And then they still got to compound all that interest on those loans. So when I see a lot of people attacking the individual, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't have done this or maybe you shouldn't have done that. I guess my kind of thing is, why are we so quick to attack our neighbor who just trying to make it like we are, like who just trying to put food on their family table too? But these big organizations who have hundreds of people like me who are paid to analyze the market, analyze the industry, and make sound business decisions, and they're paid well to do so, got it wrong, and they got a bailout on our dime. Why are we mad at the people who, went to school because they were sold a dream and just trying to make it? Why are those the ones who were trying to come at? And again, going back to my original point, going back to my very first point, and I'll shut up. I agree with the idea of some sort of forgiveness for people who have demonstrated payment. Brian, going back to your point, for people who, look, they signed that dotted line and you can demonstrate in their payment history that, yeah, they paid their debt. They just got killed by the interest. They got killed by the market. They got killed by all these things out of their control. But the stuff in their control, they paid. I feel like there should be some sort of forgiveness for them. And for the people like yourself who, despite all the obstacles, you still managed to get your debt paid off. Yes, I feel like there should be some sort of credit to you because you did that despite that. And if you were a big bank, guess what? They'd be happy to give you a credit. What are we seeing in the market? What are we seeing in the market today? We're seeing a hedge fund get, they got caught with their pants down with the shorts. And I know I'm kind of changing the subject. But they got caught with their pants down, right? You could argue, you can make the argument they're manipulating the market in the benefit of these big businesses. So an individual is held to a higher level of responsibility in this country than multi-million and in some cases $billion-dollar organizations. And that's what I have a problem with. And on that point, I'll shut up.
That's super insightful.
Yeah, and here's the thing is it may sound as if we are absolving the individual, and we're not. Because, and I haven't even said my thoughts on this, but I believe in some level of student loan forgiveness, but I want to read on the dot. I want to read the fine print. I want to know what that really means. Because there's a lot of people out there who are treating it, the idea of this, like it's some sort of a stipend. Like, and so should people who have paid it off get a credit? I don't necessarily agree with that. I want to be like, hell, good for you. I'm proud of you. You made it. But there's some people like, well, I'll gladly take $10,000 and put it toward a house or something. It's like, no, because that doesn't make any sense on a federal level for funding. And I sent you a link earlier this week, Byron, where they were kind of discussing, and there was economists that were kind of on the side of some level of student loan forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And what they had said is that, and this was a surprise to me, and it's probably a surprise to you too, Brian, a large amount of the debt are people who owe less than $10,000, but have been paying on it for years and years and years. And so one thought is they should just forgive all of them. So they're done. It's like, woo, I no longer owe $8,000. Another thought is for people who've been paying for a certain amount of time. So if I look in my Navient tomorrow and all of a sudden I owe $45,000 instead of $55,000, I'll be like, oh, cool. Now, how much is it really going to affect my everyday life?
Right.
It says it's going to take me 40 years to pay it off or whatever it is. I would love to pay it off, but it's kind of like, and this is what I was alluding to earlier. So here's the deal. Earlier, we had said that, when you're 18 to 23, you're idealistic. You're going to take all the money you're given and you're going to change the world. That's not always the case, though, because I think you can still make a responsible decision on where you want to go with your career and it not work out. I think the statistic is over 90% of the people that have a degree are doing something other than what their degree is in. And of course, there's things like marketing, because everybody has a marketing degree.
Same with finance and accounting.
Same with finance and accounting,
Every
right?
business needs it.
At the end of the day, it's about, do you have a degree or don't you? But for me, as I said earlier, I went to school, and somehow through that, I still ended up with like $20-something thousand of debt my first time in school. And my second time in school, going 4 years, and I went in for computer science, had a talk with my wife. When I was working at the hospital, I was like, look, I'm not going to make that much money doing what I'm doing here at the hospital because I didn't have a, clinical like you, Brian, but operations. And I said, hey, I want to do this biometric security. because that was a hot spot at the time for the federal government and the military. And they have these programs. If you pick like a hot, I don't know what the technical term it is, a desired target career that's right in line with where the government and the military is going, they have programs that once you graduate, you get a job in that field and you work for 10, 12 years and your loan is forgiven. These programs are out there.
I've heard about that.
It's like
I've
an
heard about that
apprenticeship,
for
basically.
teachers. I think.
Yeah, it's like an apprenticeship type of deal. And doing the research on this, something like, I want to say 46 states right now have some level of student loan forgiveness programs, similar to what you were just saying, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So you come, the healthcare industry was, you get a healthcare degree, you come work for this hospital for 2 to 5 years, and we'll forgive a large chunk of that. And if you're a doctor, you work for 10 years, we're going to pay. Didn't we have something like that? I don't want to name the employer, but I swear one of the employers that you and I worked at, they were hiring radiologists, and if the radiologists signed on the dotted line, they were paying their student loans off.
Yeah, they'd have to work there for a certain number of years.
Right.
It's kind of like, it's almost like I know that there were some folks that I used to work with, and I remember when I had just graduated from X-ray school, there were some patient transporters who were actually getting tuition reimbursement from the hospital system that I was working at. And it's almost like the same idea to me, is that like,
and I had tuition reimbursement too as well.
Yeah, and they were doing tuition reimbursement for like some of these people that were going to like X-ray school or what have you. And so the thing was that they placed them in a job though in the in that same field that they were graduating from, say like X-ray, and it was kind of the same deal. They had to sign on the dotted line, work there for something like 5 years, something like that, or else they would have to pay back that.
But I had that too at the first place. But this, that's. If you want, and then a lot of places have that. It's like, all right, if you want to work here, we'll pay for part of your schooling. So you're still accruing the rest of it, but you still have to work here for 2 years or you owe us back. But we have, there's programs that just, they wipe it for you. And so for me, it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? I said, okay, well, we can't survive on the money for me that we're making at the time. That's why I was like, well, help me pick a career.
Right.
And my wife said, sure. I said, well, if I go for this degree, we may have to move every 6 months or 8 months wherever I go if I get a job in the military. That sounds great. Okay, so I get my degree, and she's like, hell no. You join the military, I'm divorcing you. It's like, well, what the fuck? And so we were going into it with good intentions. And also what I found out is I didn't know when I signed up at the time, like by the time I graduated, I was 36. Mm-hmm. I was too old to join the FBI.
Okay.
You have to be... Yeah, they have age limits. Okay. So you have to be on I think that year, it's like you have to have already enrolled on the year of your 36th birthday before you turn 36 or something like that. I thought I was going to work for maybe the NSA or the DOD, follow my father's footsteps. And I was too old.
To be fair, Jay still looks 36.
Right.
I was too old for a lot of those programs, so I didn't know that 3 years prior, going to school full time. And when I got a focus in biometric security, what I found out is the government, most of the big shops are government contracts, which you guys know, whether it's SAIC or, I don't know, there's like 3, Boone's Allen Hamilton, all those. And I was like, oh, I'm going to work for them. For some reason, I just wasn't that attractive to them. And you either had to be really good programming, which I can't program myself out of a paper bag, or you have to have some other sort of in, and I just didn't have it. So 90% of the jobs, over 99% of the jobs actually that I wanted, I wasn't eligible for. It's like, what do you do? And fortunately, Brian, I had my EPIC certification.
Yep.
Which is what I'm doing today.
Yep.
And that's, and yeah, we get paid well as a contractor that I am now, but I'm not always employed.
Right.
And going back to my 2020 thing is, last year when they said, okay, you don't have to pay, we're not going to ask for the money for another year. You can pay if you want. It's kind of weird, but with me being off of work for 5 months, like millions of other people, you didn't feel that relief.
Right.
Because you weren't making money. It's not important how much money I make when I'm working, but there were several $1,000s I was making less a month. And fortunately, my wife has an essential job, so I didn't really feel that. So then I think if you would have asked me about student loan forgiveness 2 years ago, I'd have a different opinion. Mm-hmm. I think I'd be more hard line. It's like they're not aggressive about it. It can be expensive. that you pay it when you pay it. So I'll just pay it off by the time I'm dead. But I feel like I should pay it off. And I still feel like I should pay it off. But if I wake up tomorrow and it's $10,000 less, cool.
Right.
Because I've been paying on it, and I was talking with another podcast, a good friend of mine, Wes Tankersley, who's been on here before. And, we were having this discussion because he just got his master's last year. He thinks it's a colossal waste of money because he's not doing anything with it. That's even more money on top of that. And he hasn't had to pay yet, but he's like most of us, hey man, it's coming due in like 2 weeks, and we can pay it. I'm in a position I've been employed, for the last 5-6 months, and I'm probably going to get a contract extension. That's the career I signed up for, and I'm fine with it. But you don't notice not having to pay it. It's not like I just looked up and all of a sudden it's like, hey babe, we have $560 extra a month. What are we going to spend it on? Right. And for people who are able to save that money, they're not saving it. They're going to say, okay, well now I can pay an extra $250 on this credit card and this credit card since I don't have to pay that. So for the people out there who took advantage and said, okay, well, I'm not going to pay on my interest. Like had I still had my job last year, I would have been paying. Absolutely. Because I want to get that principal down. But there's people out there who are going to take advantage of the system either way and go out and buy material things and stupid shit.
Yeah.
So
And that's
like,
and that's always the case, unfortunately. Like with any system, no matter how well-intentioned it is, you're always going to have some people who take advantage. That's just a function of anywhere you have humans, you're going to have that, right? But I guess the last point that kind of I feel as to like why I feel like there should be some degree of forgiveness, and again, keep going back to my original point, keep in mind what I'm saying. I like the idea of forgiveness, and I like some degree. I'm always skeptical to something that the government is giving because the government never just openly gives, right? Especially because it's our money anyway. So I'm always skeptical of that. So how is a discussion for another day. But the last thing on the student loans themselves, or the last 2 points, I'd just like to say, one, I could go out today and charge up a credit card with cars and clothes and jewelry and all that, a whole bunch of crap that I can't afford to pay for, right? And I can file bankruptcy. And yeah, my credit's gonna be crap for some years. I think 7 to 10 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. But whatever it is. And then after that, I'm free, right? I'm free from that debt, off being irresponsible. But yet, you had a bunch of people who, for whatever they went to school for, they took the time they went to school, and let's say they graduated, and life just didn't kind of work out for them. They majored in psychology, it just ended up not working out for them, whatever, right? And I got specific people in mind when I say this, but didn't work out for them in the way they planned. But they legit went to try to better themselves, and our system has made it so that bankruptcy can't even get you out of it. So in a decision that people have made at your 18, 19 or whatever to try to better yourselves, you're marrying people to it for life. But again, I can go and be irresponsible right now, just totally irresponsible, buy a bunch of things I can't pay for, and I can get out of it. Like, what logical sense does that make in a society that's trying to better itself, right? So that's my first point. And then the last point I'm going to make, you guys were talking about different employers where, they would pay your debt off. I can't speak for all employers, but I know in the finance and accounting world, I've worked for companies that they would pay part of your tuition, or in some cases, all of it. Here's what's the catch. If you didn't have a bachelor's degree, they wouldn't even look at you. Like, I could do the job, but because I didn't have that piece of paper from that random school saying, hey, yes, Byron can do this, wouldn't even look at me, right? And I've had a manager role. My previous role was a manager role. I've hired people who had degrees, and I've hired people who haven't. And the people who had degrees in some cases perform worse than those who haven't. So the degree isn't really a indicator of how well this person is going to do a role. But in so many companies, if you don't have that piece of paper, they won't even look at you. And to your point about the masters, the whole tuition reimbursement that the company will give is for masters. I looked into doing that, right? Because right now, again, I have my bachelor's, but I don't have anything outside of that. And I'm actually taking, I'm paying in cash. I'm taking classes at Maricopa Community College. I'm taking accounting courses so I can sit for my CPA. I was considering going to ASU for my MBA, but when I did the math on it, first off, it was going to cost me like $50,000+.
How much would you charge me to do my taxes?
You know what? Funny enough, my next course is income taxes. That's actually the next course I have to take. So I'm gonna answer that question after that.
How about you, Brian?
But I can hook you up on QuickBooks though.
how much would I charge, or how much do I pay for my
Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, all right.
Because I have a CPA do mine, and it's a pretty penny to pay for it. So.
All right, sorry, Byron.
Give me about 3 months. I'm gonna have a better answer to that for you. But to that point, I look at that and MBA. So, okay, it doesn't financially make sense for me to get an MBA because A, they've been devalued in this market. And B, again, that's another $50,000 that's going to be on my debt. That doesn't make sense because I personally do not have $50,000 cash that I'm willing to drop on an MBA. And I even looked at DeVry, believe it or not. I'm like, okay, well, they have they have their Keller school that's, for accounting and whatever. Let's look at that. I was still looking at $25,000. I'm literally just taking classes, Maricopa Community, paying cash for them. And when it's all said and done, when I start to sit for the CPA, I'll probably be out of a total of just under 10 grand. And that's paying cash and working full time and being a dad. So, that's everything that goes into it. But for me to have that, me at 18, I wouldn't have had that logic. I'm teaching my son that now because I have a 15-year-old. So I'm teaching him that sort of stuff. Like, depending on what you want to do, you can do community college and save a lot of cost. But I didn't necessarily have as clear a guidance. My guidance was, you go to school, you go to college, you do this, but not a whole lot of context behind it. So those 2 points I'm making is, we were coming into an economy where regardless of what your degree was, people wouldn't even look at you if you didn't have one. So you had to get one to even get your foot in the door. And on the backside, if life didn't work out the way you wanted, you can't even bankrupt your way out of it. You can't even take the L for the next 10 years and work your credit back. You can't even, pay your debt to society, if you will. You're stuck with it for life. But again, I can go and finance a freaking Ferrari or something right now, just barely, right now, maybe an older one, and default on it and, charge up a bunch of crap and default on it and be in bankruptcy. And yeah, I'm going to eat that L for the next, 7 to 10 years, but then I'm free of it.
And you could say you used to have a Ferrari.
And I could say I used to have a Ferrari, and I could flex, right? But nope, I can't do that for student loans when I was just trying to better myself. So that's kind of why I feel the way I feel about it. And again, going back to the original point, it would have to be heavily regulated, heavily monitored, and it would be on a case-by-case basis. I just ain't for giving folks free money because people going to take advantage of it. And I do feel for the people who, again, Brian, like yourself, despite all the challenges of life, you freaking did it.
I don't feel for them. I'm proud of them.
Right. I mean, when I say feel for them, I mean in the sense that, it sucks that if you had to grind and do all that, and you feel like people are getting a free pass. And that's why I said, again, if you were a big company and you were like, hey, I think I need a bailout, the government would be all over you, Right, but because you're Brian the individual, they're gonna be like, F you. I'm like, no, look out for Brian the individual too. He paid his dues. Look out for him too.
Right. I feel that. And like, if I can make a few points here too, because number one, listening to this, especially like from your expertise, Byron, it's been pretty enlightening. And the theme that I've been hearing from both of you guys throughout this really awesome discussion, though, is that, direction, that's kind of the theme that I've been hearing, because, we harken back to when you're about 17, 18 years old, what do I want to do with my life? Like when I look back at when I was 17, looking to, go to college, because I was given the same spiel, like, hey, you need to go to college, you need to do this in order to, garner success in your future. You have to go and get your degree, right? And so did I make that decision in haste? Yeah, you can say that. I mean, I picked up and moved, from the Northwest down to the Southwest, a place I had never been. Fortunately, 22 years later, it all worked out, but the thing about it is, though, is that I think that when it comes to, giving guidance to young adults, there's not enough of that. There's not enough of guiding them to maybe what career they should be going to, instead of, hey, what do you think you want to do? And then just kind of just put them out there and, leave them to the wolves. Honey. Right. And that's not enough, though, right? Like it's one of those things where, you hear about countries where they actually have programs,
they have
institutions where, yes.
When you're in middle school, what you're going to be doing in high school, which
exactly. Yeah. Like Northern European countries, a lot of them, like Sweden, for example, I think it is one of those countries that, start to take interest in what these kids are good at and then try to foster them into, those types of paths for the future. And on top of that, their university education, if that is where they're destined to go, is free. Right. Or if they're like, if their interests or if their skills point them to go into a trade. And that's kind of funny because I went from a university to a trade school myself, and my associate's degree actually ended up being more lucrative for me than my bachelor's degree. And so I believe that if we do have a system where you do allow kids to start to figure out, what am I good at? What am I interested in? And what do I see myself doing, for the long haul in my future? Maybe we have less of those, situations where people, if they do graduate with some type of degree, or they end up not completing their education, now they still have this cloud hanging over their head, because they weren't able to get into an industry where their education, was focused, and things like that. So that's kind of what I was just kind of thinking of when the both of you were, just giving your opinion on the matter. And for me, the biggest thing is, like even from my own experience, it's your guidance instead of just feeling like at 18 years old, I'm jumping off a cliff and wherever I land is wherever I land. So
I agree with everything you just said, 200%, man. I think we need more. I think we need to give people more guidance. I agree with that totally.
I got a couple takeaways real quick. First off, I didn't even know DeVry was still a thing.
Yes, they are. They are still a thing, and they're still dumb expensive.
Isn't ITT defunct? And then
ITT.
Yeah, and then the next thing is, come on, Brian. Your Epic certification is what got you liquored. Yeah, come on.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
But yeah, and I didn't want to really turn this into like, should you or should you not get a degree and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's really what we're doing anyway. But because there's another big question. Okay, let's say, where do you stop? This is a now thing. So people who are still in school, good luck to you. People who just got out of school, maybe good luck to you. But let's say student loans that are 10 years or older. I think that's where you start, and maybe that's where you finish if you're going to do it. And it's a one-time thing, and it isn't we're going to give you $10,000 so you can pay us $10,000, because ain't nobody going to put that shit on their student loans.
Ain't nobody going to do that.
No. And in a way, because again, with some people saying, well, I'm going to take that money and put it toward this, it's like the stimulus. I wasn't eligible for the stimulus.
I actually was.
You were. What'd you do with the money? Did you buy some rims?
No, man. First of all, I was eligible because we filed jointly and we were still within the threshold. And then so with like the stimulus money that we got, I actually, like, for example, from like the amount of money that like my son got, because obviously he was a dependent, I stored that away in his college fund. And then the rest of the money, I just saved away. So.
Shocker. And I forgot, because you're still a single income household, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And then you have the dependent. So for us, I mean, we're both, our kids are old.
Right.
Like we can't, but there's a lot of people who, and I've said this on a previous podcast, I said, if you're eligible for it, if you're one of the people, put the money away, put it towards something. If you don't need it for anything, put it towards something. Have your money work for you. And I pointed at the microphone when you started selling that. I was like, watch this. When you started telling that story, and I knew it, that's the responsible guy on the phone. And there's millions of people who would not do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I know. I mean, I actually, on the kind of sideways here, I recently did some research. So I'm always looking at cars. So I'm a car guy, right? So I'm just always looking at used cars and the price of them. I've noticed the price of all used cars.
We should probably talk about cars a little bit.
Okay, yeah. But anyway, so this will be a good caveat into that, or segue into cars. Used car market right now is super inflated, right? Regardless of make and model, everything is inflated down to a piece of crap up to the nicest stuff. And I actually started doing some research in it. And what I found is that because of COVID, straining supplies of newer 2020, 2021 models, and actually because of the stimulus and things like that, it increased demand of used cars. A lot of dealerships and a lot of banks are offering these loans where it's like, hey, no payment for 2 months, 3 months because of COVID, whatever, right? And they'll still get you in a car. That actually, pushed a lot of people to buy cars, which is now increasing the prices of what's on the market. And I asked my wife about it because I thought the same thing. I'm like, if I got a stimulus, why would you blow that on a car, right? And my wife was like, and so just a little bit background on us. I grew up middle class. My wife grew up poor, like straight up poor, right? So she has a different perspective on life than I do. And we've grown and built together. But they were tight, right? And she said, well, when you're poor, she said, more than likely, unless you have to buy food, you're on some program that'll, that you can get food, right? And she said, poor people ain't worried about their debt and things like that because they already tight. It's like they don't even, credit. They ain't even worried about that. But they need transportation. So they look up and they got, a $1,200 stimulus check, or, if it's two people and they got kids, $2,400 plus stimulus check. that's probably one of the only times in their lives they're going to have that much money at once. So they're going to buy a car. So that's part of what's driving up the cost of all this stuff. They can get into a car with a, $100-something, $150-something, $200-something a month payment that they can probably manage. And that's kind of what's driving it up. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So that was just something I found was interesting just from some kind of one-off research I was doing.
Let's, and I pulled up this thing that I had sent you the other day, and I want to kind of end this on that. And Brian, thanks for staying on. I asked you for like 10 minutes, and it's been an hour.
It's all good. No, it's been a great conversation.
45 minutes of that great. Byron took up.
Hey, it's all good.
I feel bad, man.
I learned a lot. You taught this dinosaur a lot. Now, I ain't as old a dinosaur as Jay, but, still taught me a lot.
So this is what they say, okay? So a lot of the economists are actually in favor of this potential $10,000. And this is some of the numbers that I had said earlier. They said if loan forgiveness was limited to just borrowers who owe $10,000 or less, it would cost $75 billion for the federal government. If they were to forgive just $10,000 period, and it doesn't say if someone graduated last year, so we can assume that this includes everybody.
Okay.
They said if it was just $10,000 period forgiven, that doesn't mean given as a stipend or stimulus, but forgiven. Like I said, if I wake up tomorrow and I owe 45 instead of 55, it would cost $377 billion, and it would eliminate federal student loan debt for about a third of all borrowers.
Didn't we give more than that to foreign countries? Sorry, I'm gonna shut up now.
Right.
So that's the thing, right? So, and here's the thing, and I'm pretty sure this is a correct statement, and you guys may know if it's correct or not. So please correct me if it's incorrect. So the money that we owe, because some of this stuff is private, and that's the thing. That's what people are forgetting. Right. There's the federal student loans and there's the private student loans, and they get wrapped together. The federal stuff, it's already absorbed in the national debt, is it not? Not the private. I'm pretty sure it's already absorbed in the national debt. Because if the federal government gives you money, they're reaching in that money that they give to China and other countries.
I guess it depends on where they pull it from. Because if they're giving you money and it's coming from their own coffers, right, then it would be a receivable, right, on their books, if you think about it like that. I'm not sure. I got to look it up.
If I'm loaning you money, then it's a payable to me, to you, right? And when you pay it back to me, it's a receivable.
It's a receivable to you.
No, not if I give you money. When you give me money, it's a receivable.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if they're loaning me money, then I'm a payable to them.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And so I'm adding to the money that they've given out everywhere, even though they have their own little pocket for student loans. So if that is the case, it's already in the national debt. If that's the case, the national deficit of how many trillions of dollars are we? I don't know. Many trillions.
I've lost count.
So if they were to forgive that money, if that is the case, it would boost the economy immensely more than anything, would it not?
I would say yes, in the case that, a lot of people, and again, I say millennials because millennials tend to catch the brunt of this conversation. People want to buy cars. People want to buy houses. People, they want to do all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they, in many cases, cannot for whatever reason. So yes, the money that they get would go back to the economy. I hesitate to use the word give because obviously, the government can't really give you anything because it's your money they're giving you. But yes, it would go back into the economy and in theory boost this economy, boost the private sector because they're going to spend it.
Yeah, and I think that the real thing here, because we haven't really tried to resolve anything and we're just talking, right? But it's a Band-Aid to offer student loan forgiveness. It's a Band-Aid because we have to get down to why is everything so damn expensive to begin with. And
yes.
Right. And I don't think and I'm against free education. To me, it doesn't make sense because someone's got to pay for it somewhere.
You give somebody something for free, they don't value it.
Yeah, right. And that's with anything. And my other friend, Brian of the See Through It podcast said, well, where does it end? Because as soon as you start bailing that out, then somebody else and some other things are going to say, what about us? Mm-hmm. But this seems to be a universal issue, household to household. And most of the what about us's are not a universal issue, household to household. So I think it's up to them to decide, okay, well, we're going to do this and everybody else just shut the fuck up. This is a one-time thing in history. But if they don't do it, I'm fine. I owe the money, I'll pay it. But like I said before, if I wake up tomorrow and I owe less money, cool.
Yeah.
And going through what I went through last year, it didn't seem to impact me as much not having to pay it. But had we had to pay it, then we would have been dipping in our savings account. And there's a lot of people a whole lot less fortunate that don't have that. And we may have ran out of our savings. Making so much less money and not really feeling the fact that I didn't owe it tells me that, wow, I can't imagine having to worry about that because, again, not having to pay that means that that's money that's going to go toward the rest of my other bills.
I feel you there. And in me, again, even going back to that point, you know, if you look up and you owe $10,000 less, I think you said, what, $5,000 of that was interest. Like I said, I look at it like as simple as, you know, I want to invest in myself. I want to invest in my education. I want to make myself a better person for this society. Oh, that's going to cost you between 6 and 8% in interest.
Think about this. Think about, Brian, so you're somebody, what did it feel like when you paid off your student loans? What did it feel like when you paid off your cars? Because your cars were paid off too, right? Yeah. It's like, and all of us say, holy shit, I haven't had a car note in 3 years.
Here's the funny story about that too. And so so right before I went into consulting in 2015, part of the things that my wife and I were talking about, you know, to make the decision for me to do this was, okay, we can pay off a lot of our debt. So we totaled up the debt that we had outstanding at that point in time, not counting our mortgage. And with the car notes, student loans, credit cards, totaled about $80,000, right? And then so first couple of years, you know, we made a good dent in that because I started paying, you know, my debts aggressively.
Right.
And then there was this one time, and this is, Jay, when you and I were consulting in Chicago. You know, I basically, for me, I look at our accounts every single day, right? I go into the bank accounts and, you know, any accounts we have like credit cards or anything that has, you know, that has debt, I would look at it every day. And then so basically there was one day where I remember looking at it, totaling up what we had left of all the outstanding debt. And it was something like 35 to 40 grand. And I knew that we had the cash to pay it off in one fell swoop. And then so I talked to my wife about it, and then I thought about it for like another 3 or 4 days or whatever. And then after that, you know, as time span, I said, I'm going to do this. And that basically, you know, was going to cut our savings then in half. Because I was like, if we're going to continue, you know, paying this debt, even though we're paying it aggressively, we're still accruing interest, right? And so I want to just, you know, get this out of the way and just, you know, get this, you know, cloud looming over our heads just off so that we're just, the only debt that we had to pay left was our mortgage. Right. And so once we paid off the cars and once we paid off both student loans, I wanted to cry, man. I couldn't believe it. And just talking about it right now just kind of put a little like rush, you know, and just kind of gives me the goosebumps just thinking about that feeling again. And the funny thing is that my wife and I waited to celebrate until everything like really cleared, right? And then so once,
I know that feeling.
once we checked everything online after we made the payments posted and everything said zero, I was like, you know what? We're going to celebrate and we're going to indulge a little bit. So I took my ass to Bevmo and I got a bottle of Dom P, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, but true to form, me being practical, what did I pair that Dom P with? Pizza. Because why not? Right. So
Pizzeria Bianca or
no, it was just a local pizzeria we love over here in our side of town called Stevie's Pizza. And then I just got us a large pizza and then broke out that bottle of Dom P and we had pizza and champagne. And I did it like that because like my family didn't grow up like rich. You know, we were probably middle to low middle class. Right. But for me, it was like, how far I'd gotten at that point in time to also pay off those debts and the feeling that we had, it's like, we should celebrate. You should celebrate your victories. So that's how, you know, that's how it felt. And that's kind of how we celebrated the moment. But
yeah. And the reason why I asked that is because for people who owe less than 10, having it wiped out, it's going to feel good for them. But for somebody who owes 15 or somebody who owes 13 and all of a sudden they look up and they owe 3, you know, it's like, oh, and it's weird. It's like something you look forward to paying it off.
Yeah.
But in my case, and probably millions of others, it's like, man, I'm going to be 70 years old probably at this pace, you know? And it's like, it's just one of those things. It's there and you pay on it, but it's not like, okay, I got 8 months left. I got 5 months left. I got 3 months left.
Yeah.
You know, you always know how many months left you have on your car loan, on your credit card or on something else. And then when you pay it off, it's like, yes, finally, no car payment.
and I'm not going to say that, loan forgiveness is a bad thing. And I never intended my opinion to be that way. And I will say that if I was in the position where I still had an outstanding student loan and it was forgiven, would I complain?
Nope.
No. But I think there is something to be said about when you do set out to do something at such a young age, you complete your, education, or maybe if you didn't complete your education and you still had that debt, looming over you, but you were still able to achieve something like paying off a student loan or any loan for that matter. There's just a feeling of just, accomplishment that goes with it. It's, would I rather not have had that, had that to pay off? Yeah, sure. I could look back and say, man, that 80 grand, what could I have done with that 80 grand? Right. And, but just the act of doing it and the ability to have done it is,
right.
Is something that I'm very proud of, and, it's definitely put my family and I in such a great position, and it's given us more purchasing power. It helped us to also just, purchase this new house that we got into. And on top of that, at the same time with buying at the top of the real estate market, we're also selling at the top of the real estate market. And so, we're going to be able to benefit from that as well. But I think that just all of those different experiences led me to be able to make the decisions that, we make now together for our finances and stuff like that. So, I think there's good things to be learned from having to pay off your debt. But I guess in the end, if I were in that position, like I said, and if mine were forgiven, no, I wouldn't complain. But I still stand strong with my opinion of, am I for it? No.
Right.
If you committed to it, then you committed to it. I guess that's just who I am, so.
Thanks, Brian, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure.
I want to thank Brian Calma for joining us on the phone. And of course, want to thank Byron Jones for coming in studio. Byron drives a C63 Benz. So we'll get him back on here to talk about his car at some point. You can follow Brian at Brian727 on Instagram. You can follow Byron at Trays_AMG. So that's Trays. I guess it has to do with, it's about like the Gundam dude, TREIZE_AMG. One of the things I want to talk about or follow up with that we had talked about through that discussion, yes, it looks like student loans are already part of the national debt. Now, if they forgive it, the national debt won't get smaller because it's already absorbed in the national debt. But the thing is, if they forgive it, the national debt would actually get larger because the day they lend you the money, they're counting on the interest configured into that money on the repayment. And that interest on that repayment helps reduce the national debt. So right now, if the national debt is, the national debt, I looked up, the national debt as of January of 2021 is like $27 trillion. Student loans is about 1.5 trillion. And as we said, the federal portion of that is about 70-something%. So even if the federal government were to wipe out all federally owned student loans, there's still 20-something% of student loans that you would still owe to the private companies and the other companies. Another thing is regarding my friend Wes. So he got his master's last year, and I had said that it was a colossal waste of his money, and it was, but it wasn't. But the context of that really is Wes is doing something different now because 2020 was shut down for everybody. So he couldn't teach even if he wanted to. But he's since left teaching. But in his market in Idaho, he would never pay off the amount of money that he borrowed to get his master's at a teacher's salary. And as it is, what he's doing now, he makes more money than he would have as a teacher. But even then, it's almost as if, it was a colossal waste of his time. I thought that Byron said something really interesting with the stimulus, and I'd heard this before in the past because we always talk about debt and credit. And I have a friend who just started a podcast about credit. I've read a lot of his questions on here before, and I'm going to have him on as a follow-up. But Byron said that there's things poor people don't care about. And he's right. So I used to sell identity theft solutions. And one thing people always say is, well, you can have my identity. My credit's already screwed up anyway. Because that was one of the selling points. Like if someone steals your identity, you're going to fuck your credit up. And then what? You're going to lose your money. Your credit's going to go down the hole, and you're going to have to spend all these thousands of dollars to restore your name. But when you don't have anything, you don't care about the things that people who have stuff are worried about losing. You don't feel like you have as much to lose. So in that instant, I can understand when someone gets the stimulus check. If you're going to if you want to go around and you want to spend that money on a car, if you need a car, I understand it. But I don't understand it if you're not used to that money and all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm gonna go buy a car. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the frugal stay frugal, and save for the future, like Brian. Coming up next weekend is the Super Bowl. And I think I'm going to have a special episode. There's a few fellow podcasters that I've been really wanting to collab with. So we're going to do another episode at some point this week, and it'll drop Monday after the Super Bowl. But that's okay. It's fun to capture people's score predictions because, guys, I'm a huge sports fan. And there's another podcast out there that they like talking about the MCU, but that's not all they talk about. And I like their vibe. So we're going to get on here. If you've listened to my podcast since the beginning, I used to open up about, what are you obsessing about? And so the MCU and sports were usually what I was obsessing about. Otherwise, guys, so as we also talked about it during this episode, find me on Facebook. Find this on Facebook. It's called Hard Parking Violations. It's a group. It's free to join. Come in, engage in the conversation. It doesn't have to be about cars. This podcast is about mostly anything. Cars helps, but it doesn't have to be about cars. Hard Parking Violations. If you want to follow me on Instagram, NA2NSX, or Jhae, that's JHAE_travels, become a Patreon. What I've started doing is uploading additional content, conversation before an interview, whether it's with Billy Johnson, John Watts, formerly of Acura, any of my guests, I hit record and I upload those as bonus content. But you can only get that as a Patreon, whether you're at the lowest tier or the VIP tier. That's the only way you can get it. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe, tell a friend, and for God's sakes, subscribe to my YouTube, Hard Parking Podcast. You guys are killing me. I can't grow unless you tell everybody how badass this show is. So let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. Are you tired of blowing out your back at the bathtub while washing your dog or subjecting your canine to a water torture bath while leashed up to a post outside? Now there's a far more effective way to wash your pet while saving your back and keeping your dog happy. It's called Booster Bath, a portable bathtub on legs. Head over to boosterbath.com, one word, and pick one up. Available in 3 sizes, this tub system features a drain, a soap cubby, and water controlling wand. This tub conveniently breaks down to be stored when not in use. Want to save 10% on your first time purchase? Head over and sign up today to make that happen. Boosterbath.com. Are you tired of your dog losing its cool in a thunderstorm or fireworks? You might want to look at Tongue Treats. TongueTreats.com. High anxiety relief, pain relief, inflammation relief. It's a direct connection between the tongue and the brain. Doesn't waste time going down to the stomach, where it gets broken down, enters the bloodstream, then to the brain eventually. By then, little Izzy, my dog, has been hiding under the house for like 20 minutes. The Tongue Treat CBD strips provide rapid results for your pet with the right amount of CBD, which is not psychoactive. It's important to test and verify your pet is getting the proper dosage. A single strip should be enough. Have doubts? There's certified analysis from a lab available on the website. Think about it. Efficacy and economy. Tongue Treats.
Shut up!